My dad dumped me in the woods to make me a man and protected his golden boy, so 12 years later when they lost everything, I refused to save them and walked away. I'm 30, male, and grew up in a house where it felt like living with a drill sergeant who had a massive heart for a star recruit. My younger brother, Jared, 28, male. From day one, that kid could do no wrong. Dad treated him like he was God's gift to humanity, while I got the "you're a disappointment" special every single day. My dad was the type of guy who thought yelling solved problems and manning up was the solution to everything, from a broken arm to depression. Mom wasn't much help either. She'd always take Jared's side and make excuses for him. Jared is just sensitive, or Jared needs extra support. Meanwhile, I couldn't even get a ride to school when it was pouring rain. I had to walk 2 miles in a thunderstorm once because Mom was busy driving Jared to his soccer practice. I got pneumonia after that, and Dad still called me weak for missing school. Jared, that little jerk, knew exactly what he was doing. He'd wait until our parents weren't looking, then break my stuff and blame me for it. When I was 14, he deliberately erased my essay off the family computer the night before it was due. When I tried to explain what happened to my teacher, I got detention for making excuses. Another time, he stole the $120 I'd saved up from mowing lawns for weeks. When I found the empty box in his room and confronted him, he ran to Mom, crying about how I'd gone through his stuff and accused him of stealing. Mom searched his room half-heartedly but conveniently missed the new video game he'd bought with my money. The favoritism was so blatant it was almost comical. My sister, Claire, 31, female, saw what was happening. She was older than me and smart enough to stay under the radar. Sometimes she'd give me these looks across the dinner table when Dad was tearing into me about something stupid, like not mowing the lawn in perfect diagonal lines. She knew it was messed up, but to be honest, I don't blame her for not stepping in. Dad had this way of making people regret standing up to him. Dad had this whole philosophy about raising real men, which basically meant treating me like crap while letting Jared coast through life. When I was 14, Dad made me rebuild our deck in the middle of summer while Jared got to play video games inside, with the air conditioning blasting. I passed out from heat exhaustion, and Dad just dumped water on me and told me to get back to work. Fun times? School was my escape. I was actually pretty good at it, especially math and science. My teachers said I had potential, but Dad didn't care about my grades. The only time he ever noticed my report card was when I got a C+. He gave me this whole lecture about how I was embarrassing the family name. Meanwhile, Jared was barely passing most subjects, but got praised for his B-. When I turned 18, things went from bad to worse. Dad dropped this bomb on me that I had to start paying rent, $600 a month, plus utilities and groceries. Meanwhile, golden boy Jared didn't have to pay a cent or lift a finger around the house. Dad said it was because Jared was focusing on his football scholarship, but I was busting my ass in school too. So there I was, trying to finish my senior year while working 2 jobs, pulling 30 to 35 hours a week on top of classes. My grades took a hit. I was sleeping maybe 4 to 5 hours a night and started getting these killer migraines. Dad just said I was being weak and needed to toughen up. By graduation, I was basically a walking zombie, lost 20 pounds, dark circles under my eyes like I'd been punched in both of them. Mom would act concerned sometimes when Dad wasn't around but never actually did anything to help. Jared would just smirk when Dad made comments about how I wasn't pulling my weight, even though I was literally paying toward household expenses. Claire would sometimes slip me an energy drink or cover one of my chores, but she was heading to college soon and had her own stuff to deal with. The worst part wasn't even the physical toll. It was knowing that no matter what I did, it would never be good enough. Jared could fart the national anthem and get praised for his musical talent, but I could work myself into the ground and still be the family failure. I remember this one time I fixed Dad's truck when the alternator died. I spent my whole Saturday figuring it out, got covered in grease, skinned my knuckles raw, but I got it running. Dad's response? Took you long enough. Not even a thanks. The next day, Jared took the trash out, and Dad went on about how his son was becoming responsible. The double standard was insane. Then the last straw came about 2 months after graduation. We had this massive blowout that should have been my cue to run for the hills. I had just finished a double shift at the diner and came home dead on my feet around midnight. All I wanted was to crash for a few hours before my morning shift. But when I got to my room, I found Jared wearing my only pair of decent work boots, tracking mud all over the place. These weren't fancy boots or anything, but they cost me a full day's pay and were the only ones I had that didn't give me blisters during 8-hour shifts. I was pissed but too tired for a fight, so I just told him to take them off and clean them. Instead, he smirked and deliberately stomped in a puddle he'd already made on my floor. That's when I lost it and started yelling at him. Dad must have heard us because he came storming in like I was murdering his golden son. He didn't even ask what happened, just started tearing into me about respecting my brother's space, in my room, and how I needed to shut up and control my anger. When I tried explaining these were my work boots that I needed for tomorrow, Dad actually grabbed them and threw them in the trash, telling me to buy another pair, like I could just pull money out of my ass after paying him most of my paychecks in rent. I finally snapped and told him exactly what I thought of his parenting, that he was a pathetic excuse for a father who got off on tearing me down while babying his precious golden child. I said all the things I'd been holding back for years, told him Jared was turning into a useless leech because of him. I probably should have seen what came next. Dad got right in my face, all veins popping in his forehead, challenging me to do something about it, like he was hoping I'd swing first. I didn't take the bait, but it didn't matter. Dear old Dad decided a lesson in respect was due. Nothing says functional family like your father beating the crap out of his adult son over a pair of boots, right? He knocked me around the living room pretty good. Mom just took Jared to the other room, so he wouldn't have to see it. Heaven forbid the golden child witnessed Dad's anger issues in action. I managed to get out of there with just a bloody nose, a split lip, and what would become a pretty impressive black eye. About a week later, something weird happened. Dad's whole attitude changed. Not nice exactly, but less of a jerk than usual. He actually bought me new work boots without saying a word about our fight, started asking about my jobs, even complimented me when I fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. I should have known something was up. Leopards don't change their spots, and my dad was basically a leopard with anger issues and a receding hairline. But when you've spent your whole life trying to get your dad's approval, even the smallest crumb looks like a feast. So I went along with it, thinking maybe getting my ass kicked had somehow been a turning point. Then one Friday, he came up with this whole plan for us to bond on a fishing trip, just me and him, man to man. He said he realized I was working hard and wanted to reconnect before I moved on with my life. I got to admit, part of me actually believed him. When you're raised by someone like that, there's always this dumb little voice hoping maybe this time will be different. So I called in sick to both jobs, which I never did, and we packed up his truck and headed out to this lake about 3 hours from home. I thought I was about to get interviewed by Dr. Phil. I was dead wrong. The whole drive, he was actually being normal. He didn't say a word, but I thought he was putting his thoughts together, you know? It must be hard for him to be a good father after beating the crap out of me. So I gave him time. But then we stopped for gas in the middle of nowhere. One of those places with nothing but trees for miles. As soon as he put the truck in park, Dad's whole demeanor changed. That fake normal act dropped in an instant, his face twisting into the contempt I was more familiar with. Before I could even ask what was happening, he reached across me, flung open my door, and literally shoved me out of the truck. I stumbled and fell hard on the gravel. When I looked up, confused, he was tossing my empty water bottle after me. "Time to man up for real," he sneered. "If you're tough enough to talk back to me, let's see if you're tough enough to find your own way home. Consider this your graduation present. Freedom from the family you're so ungrateful for." Then he laughed and added, "Maybe out here you'll finally grow a pair since nothing I've done has worked. Don't bother coming back until you do." I stood there with my ass in the dirt, watching as he revved the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, dust flying everywhere. My wallet, phone, everything was still in my backpack in his truck. The realization that this entire bonding trip was planned from the start just to dump me in the middle of nowhere hit me like a punch to the gut. That's when it finally sank in. My dad never wanted to fix our relationship. He just wanted to break me one last time. So there I was, standing in a cloud of dust, watching my dad's truck disappear down the road. The gas station was one of those automated ones. No store, no attendant, just a couple of pumps with card readers. Literally nothing but trees and an empty road stretching in both directions. After the initial shock wore off, I checked my pockets. I had maybe $17 in cash, some lint, and a stick of gum. No phone, no wallet, no water bottle, besides the empty one he'd thrown at me. Not exactly ideal survival gear. The temperature was soaring too. It was mid-September, and while the days were still warm, nights got pretty cold in this part of the state. I spent a good 10 minutes just looking at the road in both directions, trying to figure out which way might lead to the city. I started walking with my thumb out whenever I heard a car, but traffic was basically non-existent. Maybe one car every 30 minutes, and none of them stopped. Can't really blame them. Some random dude with a black eye on a deserted road doesn't exactly scream safe ride. After about 2 hours of walking, my feet were already starting to blister. I was getting that familiar raw spot on my heels. The sun was starting to set, and I was beginning to wonder if I'd need to figure out how to sleep in the woods. Not going to lie, that thought was pretty terrifying. I spotted something through the trees, a road about half a mile off, and found this tiny convenience store attached to what looked like somebody's house. Straight out of a horror movie. But beggars can't be choosers. The old dude behind the counter took one look at me. My face was still messed up from the fight with my dad. I was covered in dust from the road, and probably looked half dead from walking for hours. I made up some nonsense about how my buddies had played a prank on me during a camping trip and left me behind. Not sure if he believed me, but he let me use the store phone. First, I tried calling home. Mom picked up, and I'll never forget what she said. I started explaining what Dad did, expecting her to be shocked or worried or have any normal human reaction. Instead, she got all defensive, saying Dad had already called and told her the whole story about how I'd thrown a tantrum when he asked me to help unload the truck and how I needed to learn respect and be a man. Complete fiction, but she ate it up. When I tried telling her the truth, she just said I needed to figure it out and that I was old enough to handle myself. Then she actually hung up on me. That's when it really hit me. They were both totally fine with this. They had planned it together. I was never the son they wanted, so they were literally throwing me away. The store owner was giving me this look of pity, but I had to keep it together. I was about to call Claire, but I knew she couldn't do much, and I didn't want to put her in the middle of this mess. So I called the only person I knew would actually help, my Uncle Jack, my dad's brother. They hadn't spoken in years because Uncle Jack always called Dad out on his terrible parenting style. Uncle Jack had tried to stay in touch with me, but Dad always made it difficult. I still had his number memorized, though. He picked up on the third ring, and I just laid it all out, where I was, what happened, everything. There was this long pause, then he just said, "Stay where you are, I'll be there soon." The store owner let me hang out until Uncle Jack showed up, even gave me a Gatorade and a sandwich on the house. When Uncle Jack's beat-up Ford finally pulled into the parking lot, it was almost midnight. He took one look at me and didn't say a word, just gave me this brief nod and opened the passenger door. The drive back was mostly quiet. He asked if I needed medical attention. I said no. He asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said not yet. And that was it. No pressure, no interrogation. It was the most comfortable silence I'd ever experienced. About halfway back, I finally asked the question that had been bouncing around my head all day. "Did you know that my dad was like this? I mean, I always knew he was an ass. I didn't know he'd go this far." There was a pause, then he said, "Your dad was always jealous of anyone who didn't worship the ground he walked on." We drove the rest of the way to his place in silence. He lived in this small house about 2 hours from my parents. He showed me to his spare room, really an office with a pull-out couch, and said we'd figure things out in the morning. As I was about to crash, dead on my feet from the longest day of my life, he paused at the door and said something I'll never forget. "Your dad didn't know what to do with a son who could think for himself. That's his failure, not yours." Then he left me alone, and I slept for 14 straight hours, the first decent sleep I'd had in months. That first week at Uncle Jack's was weird as hell. I kept hoping my phone would ring with Mom calling to check if I was okay. It never did. The only family member who reached out was Claire, and her texts were super careful, like she was afraid someone would see them. Later, I found out my parents told her I'd run away after a fight with Dad, and they were giving me space to cool off. Yeah, right. More like they were covering their asses in case anyone asked questions. Uncle Jack didn't waste time with pity parties. The day after I arrived, he took me to get a new ID since mine was in the backpack my dad drove off with. I had to go through this whole process to prove who I was without documentation. What a pain in the ass. Then we set up a new bank account that my parents couldn't access. On the third day, Uncle Jack drove me back to collect my last paychecks from both jobs. That was awkward. I had to explain to my managers why I suddenly disappeared and wouldn't be coming back. Uncle Jack never made me feel like a burden. He wasn't the warm, fuzzy type. More of an actions speak louder than words dude, but he made space for me in his life without complaint. He never asked how long I planned to stay or reminded me that I was sleeping in his office, just handled things with this quiet efficiency that I really respected and appreciated. About a week after I moved in, he mentioned there was an opening at the factory where he worked. Nothing glamorous, basically, moving heavy stuff around a warehouse all day, but it paid $15 an hour with actual benefits. That was nearly double what I made at the diner, plus no dealing with annoying customers. I jumped at it. The interview was a joke, the manager was an old buddy of my uncle, and it was pretty clear I had the job before I walked in. Still had to do all the paperwork, but by the end of the week, I was officially employed. The first day on the factory floor was brutal. I thought I was in decent shape from all the manual labor I'd done, but this was different. 10 hours of lifting, carrying, and stacking in a building with crappy ventilation. By lunch, my shirt was soaked through with sweat. By the end of the shift, my back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. Uncle Jack just tossed me some work gloves when we got home and said, "Tomorrow will be worse. The soreness takes a day to kick in." He wasn't wrong. But the weird thing was, as physically demanding as the job was, it was actually less stressful than my old situation. The older guys at the factory didn't treat me like crap. If they saw me struggling with something, they'd jump in and show me a better technique instead of calling me stupid or weak. Plus, the paycheck was solid. After taxes, I was clearing more than enough to start saving, even after giving Uncle Jack some money for rent, which he tried to refuse, but I insisted. I was determined not to be a freeloader like my brother. Speaking of my brother, I heard through Claire that he totaled Dad's truck 2 weeks after they dumped me. Apparently, he was driving drunk and wrapped it around a tree. Somehow, he walked away with barely a scratch, and somehow, my parents weren't even mad about it. Dad just fixed the truck, and Jared faced zero consequences. Classic. 3 months into working at the factory, I had enough saved up to buy this crappy car from one of the guys at work. It had 200,000 miles, the air conditioning was busted, and the radio only picked up like 2 stations. But I needed it. It was the first thing I ever owned outright. Uncle Jack helped me fix it up on weekends, taught me how to change the oil, replace brake pads, all that practical stuff my dad never bothered with. After 6 months, I was looking at apartments. I found this tiny studio above a laundromat about 10 minutes from the factory. The constant noise of washing machines took some getting used to, and the whole place smelled like fabric softener, but the rent was cheap. I signed the lease and moved in with nothing but a mattress on the floor, a folding chair, and some dishes. The next year was all about the grind, work, save, improve my place little by little. I started hitting the gym regularly to build up my strength for work. I wasn't trying to get huge, just functional strength. Between that and hauling stuff at the factory all day, I put on about 20 pounds of muscle. I wasn't scrawny anymore, that's for sure. Uncle Jack and I fell into this routine where I'd go over to his place most Sundays. We'd watch whatever game was on, fix stuff around his house, or just hang out. He wasn't big on heart-to-hearts, but occasionally he'd drop these nuggets of wisdom that always hit hard. Claire and I stayed in touch through all this. She was away at college, which was good because it meant she didn't have to deal with our parents as much. She'd call maybe once a week, and we'd catch up. She'd fill me in on family gossip. How Jared was flunking out of community college, but somehow it was the professor's fault. How Dad's contracting business was struggling, but he was too proud to change anything. I listened but felt disconnected from it all, like she was talking about some TV show I used to watch. Around the 1-year mark of being on my own, I got promoted at the factory to machine operator. Better pay, less heavy lifting, more technical skill. I had to learn all these regulations, but I was good at that stuff. That first year on my own, the biggest change wasn't external stuff like the job or the apartment. It was realizing that all the crap my dad had drilled into my head about me being weak or a disappointment was complete nonsense. Turns out I was pretty capable when not being actively sabotaged by the people who were supposed to support me. Who would have thought? By 24, I'd worked my way up to shift supervisor at the factory. The promotion meant a serious bump in pay and responsibility. Suddenly, I was in charge of scheduling, quality control, and making sure production quotas were met. I had about 15 guys working under me, some of them twice my age. That was awkward at first, especially with a couple of dudes who still saw me as Jack's nephew. Around this time, I also started taking night classes at the community college, studying business management. Factory work was decent money, but I wasn't trying to destroy my body long-term like I saw happening with some of the older workers. Guys in their 50s with permanent back problems, hearing loss, and messed up joints from 30 years on the floor. No thanks. The classes were tough on top of working 50-plus hours a week, but way easier than when I was dealing with my dad's nonsense. I actually got straight A's for the first time in my life. Meanwhile, Claire kept me updated on the family drama, which was getting better and better, or worse and worse depending on your perspective. Dad's contracting business was tanking. Turns out, being a jerk to employees and customers eventually catches up with you. He'd lost some major accounts and was scrambling to stay afloat. Mom had to get a part-time job for the first time in her life, which she apparently complained about constantly. But the real star of the show was Jared. My golden brother had fully lived up to his potential as a complete screw-up. After dropping out of community college, he'd bounced between minimum wage jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. He had 3 DUIs by 22, lost his license, and was now completely dependent on our parents to drive him around. Claire said he'd also developed a pretty serious pill problem, though of course my parents were in total denial about it. The best part? Every time Jared screwed up, he'd blame someone else, and my parents would back him 100%. Boss fired him for constantly showing up late. Boss was out to get him. Got arrested for driving with a suspended license? Cop was targeting him unfairly. Failed a drug test for a warehouse job? Test was obviously wrong. The delusion was Olympic level. By 26, I was operations manager at the factory, overseeing 3 different shifts and basically running the place day to day. The owners, in their 60s, were looking to semi-retire, so they were happy to offload more responsibility to someone competent. I had my own office and everything. I'd also upgraded from my studio to a decent 2-bedroom apartment, traded my Honda for a new Tacoma, and had actual furniture that didn't come from Goodwill. Uncle Jack was pretty much the only real family I acknowledged at this point. We still did our Sunday routine. I tried to pay him back for everything he'd done for me, but he always shrugged it off. Family doesn't keep score, he'd say. That hit hard, considering how my actual parents had done nothing but keep score my whole life. Claire graduated college and got a job in marketing about an hour from where I lived. She didn't move in with me or anything, but we'd meet up for dinner every couple of weeks. It was cool seeing her build her own life away from our parents. She was still in contact with them, but kept them at arm's length. She called it her sanity distance. Then, at 28, I took the biggest risk of my life. The factory owners mentioned they were considering selling the business and retiring completely. After crunching numbers for weeks and meeting with a bank, I made them an offer. I couldn't afford to buy the whole operation outright, but I could swing a partnership deal with a path to majority ownership. They went for it, partly because they knew I could keep the place running smoothly and partly because training a new operations manager would have been a pain in the ass for them. 2 months of paperwork and meetings later, I owned 30% of the business where I'd started loading trucks. The first thing I did was hire Uncle Jack as a senior consultant with a fat salary. The man deserved to get off the floor after 40 years of hard labor. He tried to refuse, saying he didn't need charity, but I told him it was smart business to keep his knowledge in-house. That got him to accept. The second thing I did was modernize everything. The previous owners had been dragging their feet on updating equipment and systems that hadn't changed since the 90s. I invested a chunk of capital in new machinery, better software, and improved safety measures. Workers were happier, production went up, and profits followed. My investment was already paying off within a year. Life was good. I had a career I was proud of, people who respected me, a comfortable place to live, and absolutely zero contact with the people who tried to break me. Perfect ending, right? Except life doesn't wrap up in neat little bows. Claire called me one Wednesday night, not our usual catch-up time, so I knew something was up. "Have you checked your email today?" she asked, sounding weird. I hadn't been in meetings all day. I pulled it up while we were on the phone and saw something from an address I didn't recognize. When I read it, my stomach dropped. After more than a decade of silence, my mother had found my work email and sent a message. Claire confirmed she'd gotten one too. "They're in trouble," she said, like serious trouble. It turned out my parents had gone from financially struggling to completely desperate. Dad's business had finally failed entirely. They'd taken out a second mortgage on the house years ago and were about to go into foreclosure. But the cherry on top of this sundae? They'd been gambling a lot. Like, pawned Mom's wedding ring a lot. Apparently, they'd convinced themselves they could dig out of the hole with one big win. And that's where Jared came in. My brother, now 28 and still living at home, had racked up some serious debts with people you don't want to owe money to. He used my parents' credit cards without permission, forged Dad's signature on some loan documents, and generally brought the whole house of cards crashing down. Now they were all facing the consequences together. The email was what you'd expect. Vague mentions of family emergencies and difficult times, without any actual accountability. Not a single "we're sorry for abandoning you." Just this assumption that blood would trump everything and I'd rush to bail them out. I deleted it without replying and told Claire I wasn't getting involved. She understood, but I could tell she was stressed. They were putting pressure on her to talk sense into me since she was the only one still in contact with both sides. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I felt guilty, I didn't owe them a damn thing, but because I kept thinking how predictable this all was. Everything falling apart for them was the natural consequence of how they'd lived their lives. My dad spent years tearing me down while propping up Jared as the golden child. Now I was thriving, while Jared had destroyed himself and taken them down with him. It was almost too perfect. 3 days later, my work phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Peter, it's your mother." And that's when the real drama began. For a second, I just sat there in my office chair. I hadn't heard her voice in over a decade. It sounded older, tired, but still had that same tone she'd always used when she wanted something, this fake sweet thing that made my skin crawl. "How did you get this number?" I finally asked. She ignored the question completely, just launched into this whole speech about how they were going through a rough time and needed to put the past behind us because family has to stick together. Classic manipulation tactics, trying to skip right over the part where they tossed me in the woods and pretended I didn't exist for 12 years. I let her talk, not saying a word, partly because I was still processing that this was actually happening and because I knew it would drive her crazy. My mom always hated silence. After about 2 minutes of her rant, she finally got to the point. They needed money, a lot of it. The house was going into foreclosure in 3 weeks. Dad's business was bankrupt, and Jared had made some poor decisions that had financial consequences. I almost laughed. "When's the last time you called me, Mom, to check if I was okay, or maybe to see if I was alive?" She got defensive immediately. "You know how your father is. He has his pride, and you weren't exactly reaching out either." Unbelievable. I was the one who needed to reach out after they abandoned me. The twisted logic they had. "How much?" I asked, just to see what they thought I was worth. "We need $150,000 to clear everything up," she said, like she was asking to borrow $20. "We can work out a payment plan, of course." Yeah, right, like they'd ever pay back a dime. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Then I called Claire. She confirmed everything Mom had said about their financial situation, but added the parts Mom had conveniently left out, like how they'd blown through their retirement fund at casinos and how Jared had stolen their credit cards to pay off some seriously bad people. The situation was even worse than Mom had made it sound. The next week, Mom called every day, getting progressively more desperate. Dad never called himself, too proud, I guess. But she kept saying he was concerned and wanted to make amends. I didn't believe that for a second. Finally, I decided to end this once and for all. I told Mom I'd meet them at my office that Friday to discuss options. I had zero intention of giving them money, but I wanted to see them face to face. Maybe part of me needed closure. Maybe I wanted them to see what I'd built without them. Either way, it was time to finish this chapter of my life. Friday came, and they showed up at the factory right on time. I watched them through my office window as they pulled up in a beat-up old Buick. Dad had lost weight, had this defeated slump to his shoulders that I'd never seen before. Mom's hair had gone completely gray. I had my assistant bring them to my office. The look on their faces when they saw me sitting behind that big desk in my own office was almost worth all the crap they'd put me through. Dad's eyes darted around, taking in the awards on the wall, the view from the window, all the signs, that I'd done pretty damn well without him. Mom was doing that fake smile thing, probably already calculating how much she could squeeze out of me. "Peter, you look good," she started, all sugary. "We've thought about you so often." I didn't bother with small talk. "Let's get to the point. You need $150,000 to save the house," Jared screwed up again, "and you're out of options." "That about cover it?" Dad finally spoke. "The economy hit my business hard. We made some investments that didn't pay off." He couldn't even admit they'd gambled it all away. "Claire told me everything," I said, "about the casinos, about Jared stealing your credit cards, about the second mortgage." That shut them up for a second. Mom recovered first. "Everyone makes mistakes, but we're family. Family helps each other through tough times. Funny how I wasn't family when you left me stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the clothes on my back, or when Dad beat the crap out of me over a pair of work boots, or when you hung up on me when I called for help." Dad's face got red. "That was different. You needed to learn to be a man. And what did Jared need to learn when you bailed him out after every DUI, after he stole from you, after he totaled your truck?" No answer to that, just uncomfortable shifting in their chairs. "All right," I said calmly. "You need $150,000 to get the house back, right? Fine. I'll give you $250,000. $150,000 to save the house, another $100,000 for your retirement." They looked shocked. Then my mother smiled. "Peter, I knew you still cared about us. However," I continued, "I have one condition. I will abandon you in the woods. If you can find your way out within 3 days, I'll give you the money." Dead silence. Then my father slammed his hand on the desk. "You ungrateful little bastard. This is how you treat your parents?" I shrugged. "Your choice. No one's forcing you." I called security to escort them out. Dad actually stood up, face purple with rage. "You ungrateful little, after everything we did for you, everything you did for me?" I cut him off. "You mean like charging me rent at 18 while Jared lived free, or abandoning me in the woods, or telling Mom to hang up when I called for help? That's everything." Mom tried a different approach, all tears and manipulation. "Peter, please, we're about to be homeless. Jared is in real trouble with dangerous people." I shrugged. "Your choice. No one's forcing you." I called security to escort them out. Since that day, I stopped hearing from them. After they left, I sat in my office for a long time, just processing. I thought I might feel bad or conflicted, but I didn't. I just felt done, like I'd finally closed a chapter that had been hanging open for too long. I called Claire that night to give her the rundown. She wasn't surprised. She said they'd rather lose everything than admit they were wrong about anything. A year has passed since then. I'm doing great with my job, and I haven't heard from them again. Sometimes news still finds me, though. Claire and I would grab some coffee together whenever she visited. One day, she told me my parents had lost everything. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Do I feel bad about how things turned out for them? Not even a little. They made their choices. I made mine. They threw me away, expecting me to fail, but instead, I built something better than they ever had. The ultimate karma isn't taking something from them. It's succeeding so completely that they have to live with knowing what they threw away. Some bridges stay burned for a reason. So, yeah, that's it, Reddit. Thanks for making it till the end. I really appreciate it. Edit, woke up to my DMs blowing up my phone, LOL. Didn't expect this to get all this attention. Thanks for all the awards and comments. To answer some common questions, 1, no, I haven't heard from Jared directly and don't plan to. We were never close, even before all this. 2, yes, I'm still part owner of the factory, and business is good. 3, for those saying I should have helped my parents anyway because they're still your parents, hard disagree. DNA doesn't entitle you to exploit someone you've abused. They had a chance to own their mistakes and couldn't even do that. 4, no, I don't think I was too harsh. They literally abandoned me in the woods to teach me a lesson. Karma's a bitch.